Welcome back to another episode of the Mic Drop Podcast, made possible by the Believe Network and available everywhere you get your podcasts, including Sirius XM stations. I am Mike Asti, and on this edition of the show, a lot's been going on, but we are going to mostly focus on football, focus on the Pittsburgh Steelers, now a 2-0 Pittsburgh Steelers team headed into a very important game for sure. Still maybe trying to prove themselves a little bit, but getting wins. And maybe even into a post-Backyard Brawl Pitt Panthers team with a colleague of mine who joined me actually in the press box there at Exeter Stadium to cover the Backyard Brawl. And that is Chris Carter. Chris Carter of the Steelers Locked On podcast and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So, Chris, first time on this particular show, so happy to have you on. How are you, man?
I'm all right, Mike. Good to be on with you here, Sarah. Actually, I think I was on with you like years ago. Like a few years ago. I think I was on with you once.
Okay. Before. Well, then I apologize then. And there's been different incarnations of this show.
This is true.
Yeah, so I started Mic Drop back when I was with the Tribune Review and Trib Live Radio, and then I've been able to keep it. And I always say one of my smartest things ever, and a colleague of ours, Alan Saunders, can attest. I've said this at different times where we're sitting there talking to the youth as we're now in our 30s, so I can kind of say that one of the smartest things I've ever done is to own this. So I can keep this no matter where I go. So yeah, you might have been on in the past, but so a return after a while for Chris Carter here to Mic Drop on Believe and also Sirius XM. So before we get to post Backyard Brawl, Chris did cover the winner of that game. I did cover the loser. We are going to jump in and talk Pittsburgh Steelers. So this team is 2-0. This team has a victory over the Atlanta Falcons, a new Atlanta Falcon team. Kirk Cousins was still kind of trying to figure things out at that point. They did have a comeback win after that to now feel like they're on the right path. A victory over the Denver Broncos, rookie QB. It's hard to really gauge this team because it also feels like, despite a different cast of characters, kind of similar to last year where the defense saved them. They won early, but the offense wasn't yet impressing and people were still debating it. Obviously, it's not Kenny Pickett, it's Justin Fields now after the injury to Wilson. He's still the QB. How do you see the makeup of this team? How do you evaluate this team? And where do you think this team realistically is, regardless of the QB still early in the year?
I think that it's very much along the lines of what you expected this team to be on paper when you looked at the roster construction, how they put things together, and what they invested in. You know, this team is invested in making sure T.J. Watt was highly paid. This team invested in Minka Fitzpatrick to make sure he stuck around. You saw right before the season started, they invested to keep Cam Hayward around. They paid Alex Highsmith. This is again the highest paid defense in the league. There was a time where they kind of lost that moniker for a little bit, but now they're back to that. And the thing is I think it's very interesting is when you hear Steelers fans saying like, oh, the Steelers are so conservative. Oh, they're living in their fears. And it's like, no, listen, y'all misunderstand the meaning of that phrase. When Mike Tomlin said that, it's because the Steelers had one of the most dynamic offenses in the league. So they leaned into that offense, which is why they would be more aggressive on offense and less aggressive on defense. But now that the defense is the leading unit, they're leaning into that side of the ball. And so it's very much what I thought they would be able to do. Now, I have to admit there's parts of it that have really impressed me, and other parts I have a lot of questions about, especially on defense. I think that they've been as advertised, and I'll be really intrigued to see if they can keep this up and stay healthy throughout the season, because I do think this unit has a legit chance to be the number one defense in the NFL.
Became a problem last year. I mean, that's what people were saying after a couple of weeks last year, and then the injuries did catch up to the team.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But this year, I think what's really interesting, Mike, is you look at the depth on this defense. Guys like Cole Holcomb, guys like Cam Sutton, guys like Terrell Edmonds, they used to be starters on these defenses. Those are depth players now.
That's a good point. Yeah,
you're not, and some of those guys aren't even available. Sutton and Holcomb probably aren't going to be available until the second half of the season, but they are your depth guys that you're calling upon. And when you look at guys like Patrick Queen is being paid well, but he's not needing to be a superstar. They're saying, hey, go in here, be a good middle linebacker, be able to flow between the plays, make sure that people, don't give up big plays over the middle. And that buttresses Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, who looks rejuvenated, Keanu Benton, who looks really sharp in the middle right now, on top of the edge rushing trio that I think is the best trio in the NFL, and what looks like a really good secondary so far. Joey Porter Jr. played very well. Dante Jackson played well when he's healthy, and then Corey Trice comes in and also plays well. Meanwhile, you got safeties that you again, every level of this defense. The one part of this defense, you're like, I feel like Beanie Bishop's got to figure some things out. But again, undrafted rookie.
That's an undrafted rookie, right? Yeah, and that's what people did bring up, though, who were cynical of his emergence. That maybe that's a concern, that if an undrafted rookie can jump into the starting lineup and can be in so much favor with Tomlin that quickly, maybe that shows you there's a hole there. I mean, that is a fair criticism to argue too, but you don't buy into then. The cynic would bring up, well, as I said, Kirk Cousins was still figuring things out. Bo Nix did throw some errant passes. He's still rookie, growing pains there. We don't yet know if they're truly legit as the numbers say now. Doesn't sound like you buy into that yet.
No, I don't. I listen. I look at this defense and I think that they're playing very well. I think that sure, like you can only play who's in front of you. Also, 100%. Like Kirk Cousins, they went into Atlanta, and if it wasn't for a false offsides penalty on TJ Watt, they would have held. They would now have 2 straight games with no touchdowns allowed. Like that's a very much part of this equation here, is that this defense has played lights out, everything that it needs with an offense that it knew was just trying to protect the football and let them be the winning factor. And we still haven't seen the crazy splash plays yet. Like last year, you saw like Alex Highsmith's pick 6 against the Browns. You've seen pick 6s from Minkah Fitzpatrick. You've seen TJ Watt just single-handedly destroy games with his playmaking ability. I feel like you still haven't even seen that yet, and this defense is still being elite. And I think that's the really interesting part is if you're getting top tier play as a unit without the superstar plays that flip a game, the X factor moments that flip a game on themselves, that speaks very highly that you're able to win in multiple different ways. And again, that's why you're talking about Fields, you're talking about the quarterback situation. Yes, it is conservative right now. But the reason it's conservative is because you don't want to put the other unit that is the best unit on the team behind the 8 ball and let them not be the controlling unit. So I think that right now they're in a good place. And I think this weekend's an interesting opportunity. You got the Los Angeles Chargers. They play a very similar style right now, as Mike Tomlin pointed out. And the Steelers, I believe, right now they're the number 2 scoring defense in the NFL. Guess who's the number 1 scoring defense in the NFL? The Chargers. And I think that's going to be a very interesting clash.
Yeah, and you have an experienced head coach, granted not in the NFL for a while. You do have now an experienced quarterback who's trying to figure things out again, and you have J.K. Dobbins, who, when healthy, is a beast. Yeah. Just look at the numbers, and he's been an historic pace beast so far these first couple seasons, and he's really hungry. This will potentially be the toughest linebacker crew he's had to deal with so far this year in Steelers defense. So we'll see if he keeps that rolling or not. Chris Carter here joining me on Mic Drop with Believe and Sirius XM. Chris of the Post-Gazette and the Locked On Steelers podcast, where he really dives in to his Steelers analysis that he's giving us here on Mic Drop. I do want to ask you about the quarterback position then, while we're still talking Steelers. It's still Justin Fields. It was Justin Fields beginning of the year, but only because Russell Wilson got hurt. Russell Wilson was in that pole position. I think all of us kind of figured he would get the job, but it's ending up being Justin Fields. And he hasn't lit the world on fire by any means, but they've been winning games. He's been managing games. He hasn't hurt the team yet. And to steal a phrase from the political world, there's been a concept of an offense so far that maybe some could have argued wasn't there in the past. How much longer do you think Tomlin's going to stick with Justin Fields if Russell Wilson is 100% healthy? What more do you think Justin Fields needs to do to lock up this starting position regardless, because they're likely not going to go undefeated? There's going to be peaks and valleys this year. And what is he doing well? What is he not doing well? What are you seeing from Fields? The one TD is clearly what people are going to be pointing to. But for me, at least, it does seem like there's more of a threat of an offense than maybe was there in the past. Numbers are not fully bearing that out yet, though.
I look at the structure of this offense, and I see a lot more forward thinking with what they're doing here. A lot of run-ins are setting up the play action. The play action passes are setting up the runs. The way that they're trying to attack, they're isolating certain parts of defenses. It looks structured. It looks more thought out and planned than what the Steelers have had the last couple of years with Matt Canada. And that's where I think Arthur Smith's doing things well. As far as Justin Fields, he is going to start until Russell Wilson's 100% healthy, because I think the Steelers, people don't realize, I think the Steelers really put a lot of faith in Russell Wilson's game managing ability, if you will. And I know that some people are like, game manager, you calling him a game manager? And yes, I am. But game manager is not some bad term. Brock Purdy is a game manager, and he's done a pretty good job of managing games in the NFL.
100%.
And Justin Herbert, early on this season, that's what he's been. He's been a game manager because he's not the guy that's doing everything to carry the team to wins. That is fine in today's NFL if your strengths on your team are your defense and more so put into being able to run the ball, which right now I'd say those are the two strengths, if you're to point to two, for the Steelers right now, that their commitment to doing both of those and protecting the football and getting turnovers on the other side of the ball. So Justin Fields is going to remain that starter, but make no mistake, when Russell Wilson's 100% healthy, I think this job is his. And that's not a slight to Justin Fields. I like Justin Fields a lot. I think that the team really wants him to be the future franchise quarterback. He's 25 years old. If he worked out, how great would that be? You'd have him for the 10 years minimum, and you'd have your next franchise quarterback lined up, and you'd probably not be paying him, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen money to stick around, so you can build around him. That would make a whole lot of sense. But make no mistake, Russell Wilson is still the guy that can go through multiple reads, make the right throws, play within the structured offense. Whereas right now, Justin Fields has done that. But as I did a film study for the Post-Gazette, I think Justin Fields, if you asked him to have to continuously cycle through 1, 2, 3, 4 reads on a play and command the offense like that without getting the chance to really hand the ball off and having to play from behind, I think that would put him in a tough spot right now. And there's plays where I think, like, man, if he just comes off his first read here, this was over here. If he gets more comfortable in this offense, it'll be there. I think that he can get more comfortable in his offense. But I think if you put Russell Wilson right now, those things aren't a problem. And that's why the Steelers are eventually going to start him when he does get back healthy. But we got to see him get back healthy, Mike, because we were told at the start of training camp, if this was a game, he'd be able to play. And then here we are, and they're playing games without him. And he's like, well, if this was a big game, if this was a playoff game, I'd be able to play. And I'm like, buddy, I used to watch Bugs Bunny cartoons when he would say this line, that line, this line. And I'm like, I've seen this game before. You're not healthy. The Steelers are okay with Justin Fields. It's okay to say that. That's what it is. But when he gets fully healthy, I do expect him to be back as a starter.
So you don't think there's anything that Fields can do, because obviously they did bring in Russell Wilson with the intention of him being the guy, at least for this year. And then, maybe the ideal scenario would be Fields would show them enough at some point to be able to give him a contract and be the guy in the future. Based on ages, it wouldn't be Russell Wilson, obviously, for the next decade. And I think Russ knew that. But now that Fields is playing, this is the NFL. If you're not playing and someone else is playing, you are generally at a disadvantage to continue to get that job back. People have lost jobs by just happen chance of not playing. Is there anything Fields can do if Tomlin is thinking exactly what you're saying? Is there anything Fields can do to make Tomlin sit back and say, that was the plan, but I can't put Wilson in now. I have to keep Fields.
Play lights out. That's really what it would be. It's just if he goes out here and he has a 3 touchdown, 0 interception game. Like let's say let's say Russell Wilson, because he's not expected to play this week. Let's say he doesn't play next week either. Through 4 games, if Justin Fields in these next 2 games tosses multiple touchdowns and no interceptions, and the offense starts putting like 24, 27 points on the board, if I'm Mike Tomlin, I have a hard time coming off that hot hand. And that's why when he's been pressed by, I think Ashley Lyotis of Channel 4 has been pressing him harder than anybody to just give a response. She keeps asking him. She's like, hey, if Russell Wilson is healthy, is he still the starter? And Mike Tomlin says, I'm not speaking in hypotheticals. But come on. Like, we covered this team for years when Ben Roethlisberger was around. That was never even needed to be a question in those days. I think it's because Mike Tomlin is reserving the space and the knowledge that, like, hey, there is a chance that Justin Fields starts to go off, and if he starts to click things because they really believe in his potential, that we might want to stick with him in that situation. But again, Justin Fields needs to show that. He's shown flashes and glimpses of it. The deep ball that he threw to George Pickens, both deep balls that he's thrown to George Pickens that were called back were beautiful throws. If he can combine that with good decision making and his athleticism with the way he can run the ball, that could make a very dangerous combination with what the Steelers want to do on offense and all the different players that they have. But until he completely puts that back together, that's what if you're looking for a line, that's the line for me. Multiple touchdowns, no turnovers, multiple games showing that, and the Steelers averaging more like 24-ish points in a game, playing the style that they want him to play. If they do that, I think Justin Fields might have a chance to lay claim to it. But until that, it's Russell Wilson's job when he's healthy.
And that's probably fair, and that's probably likely. And it also, that sounds like a high bar that even if they're winning, that it doesn't seem likely Fields is going to get there quick enough to not have us see. Smart money is on that at some point you're going to see Russell Wilson wear a Steelers uniform in a game that is not just pure mop-up duty. I feel like that's likely the scenario regardless of what happens here. And even if they're winning, but it's winning the way they've been winning, it sounds like that he would throw Wilson in there when he's healthy. But fortunately, when you're 2-0 versus being 0-2, you don't have to rush anything. Like you are playing, and Tomlin said that. But yeah, I've heard Ashley's questions. Give her a dap for keep asking, because you know that bothers Mike T when he gets the continuous question off the same topic week after week after week. And he's smart. He gives you that we're preparing for Justin Fields to start, which is not, people can throw the breaking news off of those comments, but that's not officially announcing as much as some would like. Chris Carter here joining me from the Post-Gazette and the Steelers Locked On podcast on Mic Drop with the Believe Network and Sirius XM. And I do want to shift gears here before I let Chris go. A lot to cover here. He's a busy man for sure, because he covers multiple programs, multiple teams, and one of them is the Pitt Panthers, the beat writer for the Post-Gazette. They did win the Brawl. They had a 10-point win to come back and win the Brawl. They actually, according to Vegas, were the underdog going in, even though they were the team that had been winning and they were the home team. Now, I certainly, and I've been writing about, I do think West Virginia blew that game, but tons of credit to Pitt to win that game and Holstein to lock up the starting job. Looking at the schedule the rest of the season and knowing now how the college football playoff works, where you win a conference, you're in, more of a college basketball thing. For me, it feels like Pitt also, unless they win the ACC, is going to really need to become a big Cincinnati and West Virginia fan to hope they turn the season around and they can have those be quality wins and that they're not bottom feeders of the conference. Now that this Pitt team is 3-0, likely going to be 4-0, going to sweep out of conference play for the first time with Narduzzi. What is
first
the ceiling?
Time ever, actually.
First time ever. Okay. Yeah. So what is the ceiling for Pitt this year? What do you think the reasonable expectations are for Pitt this year? And why, despite the situation now, are they still really not getting near being ranked? Even ESPN FPI has West Virginia ahead of Pitt still. Like, is there actually an argument Pitt's being slighted so far? Or can you contextualize that with the schedule to this point? What are your thoughts on Pitt from now to the end of the year and what you've seen from this team and still need to see?
When I looked at this schedule, if I said if they came away with a 3-1 in the non-conference part of the schedule, they were in a good place. Okay. The fact that they are 3-0 with a chance to go 4-0 against the Youngstown State team that just lost to Duquesne this past weekend is a very good sign for their potential this year. And like you said, I don't look at the ACC and think that there's too many teams that scare you in that conference.
They could win it
if you're Pitt. I'm not even saying that they could win it. I'm saying, if like you're 4-0 going into conference play, so then you got 8 games after that. If they go 500 in the conference this year, that's 8-4. That's a great year bouncing back from 3-9. In Pat Narduzzi years, that's showing like, hey, 3-9,
way above expectations nationally for sure.
Exactly. And would they be ranked at the end of that? Probably not. They might be pushing for some votes in that situation. But if they can go 5-3, 6-2 in the conference, and then make a push for the ACC championship appearance, there could be something there, Mike. Like there could be something that they can get that. Now, right now, it's tough for me to say that they're being slighted. Yes, they're 3-0 and they're undefeated. But if you're watching those games, you're looking at, they were down 21 points like late in the third against Cincinnati and then just went berserk. They were down 10 points less than 5 minutes to go against West Virginia. They went berserk. Maybe those teams aren't that good. And maybe Pitt. It's like I get the hesitation. I don't think Pitt's being slighted just yet. But if we get to 7-0, like if we're looking at Pitt and they're 7-0 by that point, and then they're not ranked,
North Carolina's like beatable. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right.
Then it's like, okay, what's going on here? But right now, I think it's legitimate. But I think there's reasons to buy into this Pitt team because, a huge part of what was the problem last year was just simply the offense was that bad. I mean, historically terrible. In all of Pat Narduzzi's years, it had not been last in total yards, last in points scored, last in rushing yards, last in third downs. It was just abysmal from top to bottom.
Quarterback play lost the brawl. I mean, let's face it.
Absolutely. I mean, Phil Dracovic was just absolutely terrible, and they eventually set it on Nate Yarnell. But this Eli Holstein kid, Mike, he is seeing the field. He is making quick decisions. He is understanding when to make a quick decision, when to hold on to it and say, okay, they're in max coverage. Let's wait this out. Let's let some guys break open. 100%. The fact that he's doing this as a redshirt freshman in his second and third starts, I think bodes very well for the future of Pitt football right now. If that keeps up, like right now, he's 9th in the country, I think, in passing yards. I think that he's up there in passing touchdowns. Pitt's offense is up there, I think, in the top 15 right now as far as points and yards gained right now. You look at those factors, and if they're able to keep that up, against an ACC that I don't think is all, doesn't have too many powerhouses right now, if any. I don't see why they wouldn't be ranked at some point this season if they were able to get to that status.
And it feels like, and there is an argument to be made that even when Pitt won the ACC that year, that they took advantage, which is credit to them, of the ACC not having the normal powerhouses, Clemson being a little bit down. That could happen again. That's when you need to seize the day. That's what West Virginia's been missing. You need to seize the day on the years that maybe the top dogs are not getting it done. And clearly what we've seen with Florida State, Clemson, etc., these teams are all beatable. Even if they end up ranked or they end up as better seasons than Pitt, all of the teams throughout the ACC are beatable teams. Even maybe Miami is one that could cause problems, but it's a situation where Pitt certainly can contend in the conference, and now it gives you a path to the playoff, unlike that ACC championship year where the committee could say, well, the group of 5 lost, that you can't go that far into it. Now you have a path. You would be in. It wouldn't even be a debate. So we'll see. I do think it'll be a problem for them having a chance at an at-large bid because, maybe these teams they're beating aren't as good as advertised. So where would be the quality win if you still lose to the teams you're an underdog to? But they've been a surprise. Give them credit for that. Eli Holstein's looked amazing so far, and he's really looked like a leader who's unfazed. He looked like the veteran who had been through the fire, whereas Garrett Green looked like he was the redshirt freshman who didn't know what was going on. Because I remember you said in the box, 30 seconds left, Pitt celebrating the crowd's going wild, and you were saying, this game's not over yet. The Pitt's defense hasn't been great either. But Garrett Green then gave you a succession of plays that just had no chance. And Eli never gave you that at all in the game. And it'll be interesting what that offense looks like the rest of the way. Because I know you also were saying up there, it looked like in the second half, and maybe it's just the West Virginia secondary, but it looked like Pitt figured out, hey, if we stop getting cute, they can't stop us. When we're doing flea flickers, they can stop us and get pressure.
Yep.
And they did get 5 sacks and should have had 9 in that game. West Virginia's pass rush was better than it's been in years, but it didn't matter because he scrambled and made the plays. We will see when he's not facing Cincinnati with an injured top player and West Virginia that is literally the second worst secondary in the entire country right now. When he's not facing that, we'll see what happens. But they're already getting close to above expectations because they kind of had what the Mountaineers had last year where people were saying 4 wins, you go ahead and win 9, and it's a celebration. That's the situation Pitt's in this year, which is kind of nice that there's not pressure to get in the playoff now. If you get 8 wins and you have a redshirt freshman, Narduzzi can absolutely say, we're going next year. He's going to be a sophomore. He's ready to go. You swing a win or 2, we're going to contend, and it really helps recruiting. So, it was something else to see it for sure. Definitely give a lot of respect to the kid to be able to do that in that environment, in that game, and he's going to get another crack at the brawl next year too, and then we'll see when that series reboots. It'll be a question mark how many Mountaineers on the staff for players get a crack at that thing moving forward. But West Virginia has that 1 game left and then a bye to really figure it out. And I wouldn't also be shocked, Chris, that if the Mountaineers turn their season around, I'd imagine this happened with James Franklin last year. Week 7 or 8, Pat Narduzzi's just going to slide in. Hey, look at West Virginia. They're actually good, and we beat them. Just to chalk a quality win up that maybe people were trying to rag on.
Never discount the opportunity for Pat Narduzzi to say something petty of that boosts his own team or just gets his own thoughts out there. But yeah, if West Virginia goes on a run this year at some point, he's going to absolutely, oh yeah, we beat that team, right?
Yeah, that's what James Franklin. I had Penn State media texting me in the middle of pressers in November saying, yeah, James Franklin just randomly just talked about how great Garrett Green looks. It makes no sense, but it does actually, because he wants to make his resume look better than what they did against him. Yeah, and of course Narduzzi ended up being a little bit of the story for what he said after the brawl, but went to Pitt and they deserved it. Chris, I definitely appreciate the time. It's been a while since you've been on this show. We've done some stuff though otherwise, and I'll have to have you back for sure. Definitely happy to have you on, and more than happy to have you back. So appreciate the time, man.
Thanks for having me.
Chris Carter of the Post-Gazette and the Steelers Locked On podcast. As we just talked some Steelers, we talked about what really this team is right now and what the quarterback situation is, and fans may be upset, but even if the Steelers are winning, it's going to eventually be the Russell Wilson show unless Fields sets the world on fire. I definitely agree with Chris there, and that's kind of what the vibe has always been. So we'll see what happens. This test against the Chargers is a lot to look at because that is a team that now looks poised to make a run this year, although it's still very, very early this year. And knock on wood, and I will do this, you don't want anyone to get hurt. J.K. Dobbins' health, he's been great. I wrote about it actually at Yardbarker. He's been great. That got to continue. That got to continue. His health got to continue. His health is the major piece of what they're doing. As Chris said, and it's kind of been underrated, Justin Herbert set the world on fire fantasy-wise a couple years ago. With Harbaugh, it does feel like maybe he'll be more of a game manager, and that might be better for him. Doesn't mean the numbers won't be there at all. I'm not saying he's Trent Dilfer with the 2000 Ravens, but if they can have that out of J.K. Dobbins, or even a little bit less of that on a consistent basis, and he's healthy, and they don't have mistakes from Herbert, but get yards here or there, then I think they're poised, despite maybe less talent in that receiver room than a year ago. And then Pitt can make noise in the ACC. It is wide the hell open. You can say what you want about Kent State. You can say what you want about Cincinnati and West Virginia. And I cover the Mountaineers. I do think that team clearly is overrated. We'll see what they do in Big 12 play. And that secondary has just been so bad. But Pitt can maybe use the ACC by itself. And they do have the situation where they don't have to make the playoff this year. They have a redshirt freshman. There's no pressure to get in. Yeah, they didn't have the opportunity when they won the ACC, and they're always going to kind of probably be in their feelings about that. But it doesn't matter, and they're undefeated in out-of-conference play. It doesn't matter as much what you do if you do take advantage of the ACC. That schedule is wide open now. They don't have behemoth games. There's not probably many opportunities for true quality wins, but they certainly could win the conference. And if they don't and get a 7 or 8 win year, then it's hard to be mad about it if you're a Pitt fan. On the West Virginia end, you don't want to root for Pitt by any means, of course, but they kind of do need Pitt to maybe look like a solid, at least a bowl team this year, to make that loss not look so bad, because they were a favorite even going into that game on the road. And maybe the national perception of Pitt still needing to prove themselves is why West Virginia was a favorite going in, despite that bad loss to Penn State and the way they played. It wasn't a bad loss, but playing really bad against Penn State and only the FCS win. So the Mountaineers have a lot to figure out. And they have that Kansas game coming up, a horrible matchup with Jalen Daniels. If they weren't ready for Eli Holstein to run around, they're not going to be ready for Daniels to do it either. And they weren't a couple of years ago, but they have a bye then after that game where the future of the program and a lot of decisions will be made after that game. So we will definitely see, and it's a must-win game for West Virginia for sure. But if they don't, or even if they allow a lot of yards and win it in a video game style of 50-42 or whatever, because I would bet the over, by the way, for the bettors, those defenses are not good, then maybe it finally pushes something to give coaching-wise. I don't think Brown just yet. Sorry, fans. I do think they're going to wait a little bit on Neil Brown. I just do. That's my guess. That's my guesstimate right now. Not 100% down on it, but I do think they're going to wait on Brown a little bit. And I would also be shell-shocked if they make a decision on Brown and fire Brown with Jordan Leslie not going first. I think Jordan Leslie's coaching for his job against Kansas, and win or lose, based on the numbers and maybe even immaterial to them, he'll be the guy that likely goes during the bye week, and he would go and be a domino to fall before Neil Brown, and then Neil Brown, they're going to promote Shadon Brown, whether you like it or not. Then Neil Brown will be coaching for his job from then on. Again, thanks to Chris Carter of the Post-Gazette and the Steelers Locked On podcast, colleague of mine in the Pittsburgh media scene, for jumping on here, talking some Steelers, talking some post-brawl Pitt Panthers. Mixed a little West Virginia in there for you Mountaineer fans who follow me with my professional coverage as well. This has been another edition of Mic Drop here, made possible by the Believe Network and available everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Google Play, TuneIn, etc. And of course, also available thanks to Believe on Sirius XM. So click subscribe, download. Thanks to all of our advertisers and all of our sponsors and everybody who's played during this show, as well as the Believe crew doing a lot of work to make those possible during these programs. And look out for another one of these coming up ASAP.